Welcome back my cosplay friends, and hey to all the new gals, guys and everyone else tuning into the channel. Today we're going through another cosplay related thing. Last time it was stilts, and this time we're going to be getting a little bit more technical and hopefully making you a little less afraid to try airbrushing. So what does an airbrush consist of? First off, that is your airbrush. It is just the actual bit that you hold and put your ink in. Then you have the other essential item, that is your air compressor. Your compressor, it blows air. Now for reference, this air compressor is about 8 years old, and it was basically the cheapest thing I could find at the time on eBay, and it has lasted the whole time. You can see I've slapped on some impromptu repairs, but otherwise, for light cosplay use, it has done me well. And I would say don't be afraid of getting the 50, 60 pound compressors off eBay. They just seem to work. It's a perfect little workhorse. And then from your compressor, you'll need your hose. And then of course, you need your paints. There are many, many types of paints. We have acrylic inks. These are what I use more than anything else. We have acrylic enamels. These are game air paints. And we have alcohol-based inks. Basically, almost any artist ink will go through an airbrush. You might have to dilute it, you might not, but anything that claims to be airbrush safe will also go through an airbrush. And then other ancillary items that you'll want to have: a lot of airbrush cleaner, possibly some airbrush thinner. In this pot, I have some isopropyl alcohol, and this thing is really useful. It's just a little thing for sticking your airbrush in to clean it off. And then we also have an airbrush cleaning kit, which I'll show you in a minute. When I am setting up to airbrush, I will always make sure I have 2 cups of water, one of which I will always make sure remains clean, and the other is for dumping out ink and spraying the brush into. So how do we start with our airbrushing? This is my airbrush of choice. I order it from everythingairbrush.com, and it is an AB110, and it is a fantastic generic dual action airbrush. It's got a couple of knobs and switches on it. It is great for moderate detail work and moderately large areas. I wouldn't use it for miniatures painting, but I would happily use it for details across a costume. So we hook it up to the compressor. You might find you have bayonet fixings, quick swap fixings, all sorts of different fixings for your airbrush, but this seems to be pretty standard for small compressors. And you just twist it on, and you turn the compressor on, and you get air going through to your airbrush. Boop, boop, boop. What are all these things on the airbrush? This is a dual action airbrush. What you have going through it is a pin that goes from one end to the other, and when you press the button, air passes through over the pin and draws ink in from there and sprays out. And depending on how big the gap is between the nozzle and the pin, depends how much ink you get coming out of your brush. And how you vary that is with this dual action airbrush, is you pull back the lever. This little nozzle bit can adjust how much paint flows from the cup down there. This is a gravity, if you see, you hold it like that, pointing, and gravity feeds down through onto there. You can get suction air cups, which have a big cup underneath and will draw up. And then the final adjustable bit is this little bit at the back. You twist that open to allow more travel on the needle, so you can spray larger and larger areas. Some airbrushes will have an adjustment on the bottom as well, which means you can vary how much air it lets through, but you shouldn't need that with a dual action airbrush because you get to do that with your fingers. So, shall we see this thing in action? The first thing we're going to do is the thing that I think is the most valuable thing an airbrush can do, and that is putting down really natural shading and darker sections on masks and props. I think it is invaluable for setting up darkened patches where 2 materials meet and makes objects look amazing and just pop. So we're going to do that for our Jin mask here. You can see it's been base coated, but we're going to shade it now, and then later we'll be dry brushing over that shade to bring out all the texture, and then the shading will sit underneath that dry brushing, creating a lot of depth in the mask. So we're going to put this down. We're going to take our airbrush, and we're going to take some drops of black, and we're just going to put the drops of black into the cup. And then we're also going to mix that with some white to create a light grey. I'm going to put in a tiny bit of airbrush thinner just to help it flow. We can have a palette, and we're just going to spray it through onto the palette first. So you can see if I push it down without pulling back the lever, we get nothing coming out of it. If I pull it back just a little, you can see how we can put some really fine details in. And then as I slowly pull the hammer back, I slowly pull it back, you cover bigger areas. And of course, you can adjust how far you are to how close you are. And that is the very, very basics of airbrushing. What we can do with this guy is we just want to put shades in on him. So we'll airbrush from underneath, just aiming ever so slightly into the recesses. Boop. We don't really mind if we're hitting the raised surfaces because we're going to be dry brushing over this guy later. And there we go. You can see already the lighter parts look lighter and the darker parts look moody rather than filled in. And then after this, we're going to go back and dry brush this, but that's a thing for a different video. Now, with the leftover ink, because black is such a strong color, I'm happy to pour out the leftover black into my pot. And then what I also want to do is get some kitchen towel and just clean it out as best as I can, because we're going to swap to a new color, and we don't want any of this residual color being in there. And then this is where our clean water comes in. So we're going to pour the clean water in and just run the airbrush through, which is what this thing's for. We're just going to run it through. Use the water to clean off the nice fresh ink that's gone through it. We're going to do that a few times until the water runs clear. And there we go. The stuff coming through is now clear, which means the airbrush is cleaned. So what other easy tricks can we do with an airbrush? Along with shading things, we can highlight things. So once again, we're going to put some white into our airbrush. We're going to mix some blue in there to create a nice light blue. The colour will almost always look darker in there, in the pot, and then it will come out. So here, just do it until it starts to come through. Yep. You can see it's coming through here. However, that's still a little dark for my liking. And there we go. So now what we're going to do with this is we're going to lean this back, and what we're just going to do, spray it in such a way that we only catch the highlights of this. Because this is a 3D mask, we should be able to spray with this colour in such a way that the low-lying areas are left with the darker blue. This is a thing that's more than applicable for anything with texture and details in it that you want to bring out. So it doesn't have to be a sculpted object. It can easily be a piece of foam construction that you've just put a lot of work into. And then you can see that really brings out the scale texture in a very naturalistic manner. Yeah. So we put that to one side for that to dry. We're going to put away the rest of that. And we're going to make sure we clean our airbrush thoroughly. So copious amounts of water. And once we start using the cleaner, because this stuff, it's not exactly toxic, but you also don't want to be breathing in its fumes. Putting it through one of these pots is a nice idea. I'm going to run this through until everything that comes through it comes out clean. There we go. Let's have a quick word on troubleshooting. Hopefully, if you run your airbrush through thoroughly with airbrush cleaner, you will never have to resort to using these. These are an airbrush cleaning kit, and I'm just going to quickly show you the very basic steps you want to take to clean an airbrush that has clogged. Detach it from your air supply. First thing you want to look for is to take these nozzles off. This airbrush has 3 separate nozzly bits at the top. So you can take it off and be very, very careful with that needle. Not only is that needle very sharp, it is also the fine 0.2mm tip of that is what allows your airbrush to work. So in here, there are 3 parts. Each bit one has a tiny hole that goes through it, and you can use either these pipe cleaning brushes or this airbrush cleaning pin to basically go through each of these, push it through and wash each one of them out. The one other thing you can do if your airbrush has gotten clogged and that doesn't help is what might have happened is your needle might have gotten dirty. Some paint may have dried on the needle. So you take the back off your brush, undo the clamp holding it on, and holding it upright, because there's a little spring-loaded piece here that is held in by the needle being in there, you can then pull your needle carefully out of the back. Our needle's filthy. So what you can do with that, take some more kitchen cloth, soak it in airbrush cleaner or whatever you're using and wipe it down. Wipe it down. Sometimes, always wiping towards the point. You don't want to bring it towards you and blunt your point. And once you've done that a few times, you should be able to run your fingers along it and feel it's perfect. So before you put the needle back in, put the front back on your airbrush so the needle has a place to get seated, and then supporting it so you're not stabbing the tip into anything in the airbrush. Push it through until it sits comfortably in the end. Tighten it off and then just twist it back together. And for my peace of mind, I just like to rinse it all off so it's not got any of the cleaning chemicals left on it. In fact, what you can do at that point is just to make sure that there is still liquid flowing through it, turn the compressor on and give it a bit of a spray. And there we go. That's one clean airbrush, ready to go, back in storage, for you to spray your next amazing piece of cosplay. I hope that has armed you with some additional knowledge that you didn't have before in how to use a basic airbrush setup to spray your cosplay, and made you a little less afraid to pick a cheap setup up for yourself and give it a go in the future. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop a comment below asking a question. And also, if you have friends who ever want to try picking up an airbrush for cosplay, please remember this video and share it with them in the future. Hopefully it has all the basic information they'd like to know. Anyway, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. I had a lot of fun making this video, and I would like to make more like it. Please do let me know if you have any ideas of other content just like this that you'd like to see in the future on this channel. I would love to make more tutorials like this. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.